Can you say something, Matt?
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yep. Okay, cool.
I'm a little bit further from the mic, so if you think it doesn't sound as good as it could, I can try to readjust.
The levels seem very good, so
Okay.
as far as I can tell. Actually, the farther's probably better.
Okay.
Uh, just get the live stream going. All right. Make sure the levels are good. Testing. If I get this close, that seems pretty good for me. Go ahead and talk, Matt.
I'm still here.
Yeah, you're
I
sounding. That sounds pretty good.
Cool.
Testing, testing, testing,
You got to
testing.
get closer. Using
Testing,
the arm might be
testing.
better.
Well, that's fine. I can hear myself though.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to get rid of that
Okay.
without also getting rid of Matt. Is it delayed on yours? Because mine seems undelayed. It's
It
not
just got a
bothering me.
little bit choppy,
It's
but
only slightly delayed, like maybe a quarter second delayed,
Oh, really? Okay.
but not the usual like half second. Maybe it's like might be even slightly less than that.
Yeah. Is it bothering you a lot?
I'll be okay.
Okay. Let me make sure it's not coming through. All right, I'm testing audio. Go ahead again, Matt.
I'm still here.
Go ahead, Orion.
Test 1, 2, 3.
I'm over here.
All right, let me listen
The
to that.
Penguins won big tonight.
Yeah, they did. I think they've chased Lundqvist like 5 of the last 7 times they've played him now.
Is he declining? He used to be like top notch.
I mean, he's old. He's still made the. I mean, he made the All-Star game,
Okay.
which they just announced, but he's just getting old. He actually probably has been bad for that franchise in terms of they've been a bad team for a long time that he's kept in mediocrity.
Right. He's been good enough so that they don't drop to the bottom, but not
Yeah.
gonna just, save 99% and carry them to a Stanley Cup or something.
Yeah.
Hold up, I gotta cut out the audio real quick.
Whoa. I can see you guys.
All right, we're back. Still there, Matt?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Cool. Sweet. So how I want to do this, I don't know. What do you guys think? What bet? Just kind of go down games that are on our lists, and then tease topics out of that.
Yeah,
I think we
just
might also
threw
start with kind of what we mean by aesthetics in games, unless
Yeah.
you want to just kind of hit on that as we go.
Yeah, no, we could start with an overview. What was the other idea you had, Matt?
games that we
Oh, most want redone.
most yeah
That most what?
most want to see improved aesthetically, or
Okay.
would most benefit from a aesthetic revamp.
Yeah. I'll have to think of ideas as we talk.
Yes.
Oh, wait, never mind. I know what my number one is on that. Easy.
Well, don't tell me.
I'm not going to tell you. No. Okay.
That's not what I want.
Let's see. Anyone watching?
Was it Mark P in there?
Yeah, Mark's in there. Hey, Mark. Oh, he's here for the cat. Amber, remember to bring the cat in at some point. What was that? I didn't hear anything. The cat and Amber are snuggling on the couch in the other room. All right.
What are you drinking there?
Julius.
Oh, nice. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? Oh, yeah. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
What did I do with that?
Oh, look at that. What a good cat. You were famous on the internet. Mark is watching. You know him. You like him. Oh, she's so comfortable. She doesn't want to get put down. Look at her. She doesn't want to be supported by her own weight. She wants someone else to support her. Alright, let's do the silence while Matt's gone. Here, what would be the way to get our voices out of it?
Alright, I'm back.
Sometimes we have to send everything through Voicemeeter. I know I had it solved before. I don't remember what the solution was.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
I'll have to think about it more. Alright, you're back?
I am back.
We did the silence while you were gone, so can't ruin it. Alrighty. Welcome to the Thoughtful Gamer Podcast, episode 44. Today we're going to be talking about board game aesthetics or production values or art, or whatever you want to classify it as. Here with me today is Orion.
hello.
And Matt.
Yo, that was really non-committal there.
What, not to the topic?
Yeah.
Have
yeah,
I ever
just like
committed to a topic?
No.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Why commit now?
We'll figure it out as we go.
It's a brand new year. It's not a time to make commitments. What is this?
Never change, Mark. Never change.
Yeah. It's like oh, what was the character? What TV show was I watching? The character was like her goal was to not learn anything and never change. I forget what show that was I was watching.
The one you were just watching the other, like, yesterday?
No.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't The Good Place, was it?
No, I don't think so.
I don't remember. It's completely gone out of my head. Anyways.
Hey, last year I said that my New Year's resolution was to gain fewer than 15 pounds, which I met.
Nice.
Very nice.
So, if you're going to set goals, be, what is it? Team, like, I forget the acronym. If you're going to set goals, make them manageable. That's what the M stands for.
SMART goals, right?
SMART, that's it. Yeah.
Specific,
Yeah.
manageable, or measurable. No, it's not. It's measurable, right?
I'm not good with acronyms.
Yeah,
And
measurable
then
goals are
the
always
T is
good.
time bound, and I forget the others.
Yeah. I have never in my life made a New Year's resolution.
Well,
I make them every
Maybe-
year. I think I like New Year's because it's like, it's a fresh start. It's a time to reevaluate where you're at and think strategically, big picture about long-term, what you're hoping to accomplish and what you did or didn't do last year, and hopefully improve and learn and move on.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think for me it's a combination of I know I wouldn't be able to hold on to any goals, and so I'd just be setting myself up for disappointment, and also wanting to rebel against the arbitrary constraints of time we've developed as a civilization.
I mean, yeah, I get that in a sense of like, we just picked this day as, this is the new year, and there's no like cosmic event that says this is the new year, but we have decided upon an organizational system.
Oh, sure. And I don't think setting goals is bad. I'm just saying it's a helpful delusion that I don't think I can do.
Well, I'm still helpfully deluded then.
There you go. Anyways, we're going to talk about board games that look good or that do
that's what
not
we're gonna talk
look
about.
good. Wait, what was that?
I assumed this was a hockey podcast. but-
Oh, no.
Yeah, I thought we were going to talk about the Penguins' winning streak. I wore my Penguins pajamas just so that we could talk about the Penguins.
Oh, no. Did they actually win tonight?
Yes, they did. 7-2.
Wow. So that's now, what,
it was-
7
it
in
was-
a row?
Penguins are doing great. Yeah, 7 in a row.
Yeah, I
they're
looked
fine.
it up. I saw they're like 5th.
Yeah, it's mid-season. We're getting our act together. There's your Penguin update.
It's like both of your teams, the Seahawks and the Penguins, they just screw around the first half of the season and then finally figure out how to play in the second half every year.
Yeah.
Now my football team, on the other hand, fell apart, missed the playoffs, and is now a circus.
Yep.
I saw that. Yeah, your best player just didn't show up.
Yeah, we thought he had an injury. Nope, he just was being punished for not showing up.
Nice job. Well, he certainly wants to be traded, I assume. I mean,
Yeah,
to be honest, like this year and next are probably their only hopes. Like Roethlisberger's getting old.
Oh yeah,
They gotta start.
Oh, I
rebuilding,
mean-
so they're doomed.
But
basically.
I think by most measures, this was Roethlisberger's best season as a passer.
Was it?
Yeah,
He had a pretty good year, I think.
he hit 5,000 yards.
I thought
Really? Wow.
people were saying that his arm strength was noticeably lower. Maybe they schemed around it, which is what a smart team would do.
In other dumb quotes, sports quotes of the day, the GM of the New York Giants said that having priorities leads to making mistakes, especially with quarterbacks, and forcing it means you're more likely to make a mistake.
In reference to what?
In reference to Eli Manning still being an NFL quarterback, or so he claims, and not drafting a quarterback in the best QB draft in the last decade.
Huh.
Because Saquon is a generational running back.
He did do well, but still.
He is really good, but, I mean, for fantasy, he's incredible. But in terms of organizationally winning, a quarterback crushes every other position in importance.
True, yes. Well, my team is... we lost as was expected because our quarterback got injured, so I didn't really pay attention.
Jimmy G.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they're any good next year, I guess. We're going to get some good draft picks again. Maybe their defense will get better. Anyways, that's the sport update. I haven't been paying attention to sports at all. I guess, once the playoffs start, I'll pay attention to football again.
Yeah.
We're in that gulf where fantasy stopped, and the actual playoffs haven't started.
Yep.
And half the games don't matter.
Yep.
Anyways, let's talk about some board games. Unless there's more Penguins talk you want to get out of your system, Matt.
I'll save it for next time.
Okay, we'll bench it for next time. So the idea was to talk about games where the aesthetics of the games actually change our valuation of the game. And that kind of was the specific impetus for this podcast topic, because I was thinking about it, and I think we prioritize the aesthetics of a game far less than a lot of people who talk about games. I look at other reviews and watch other reviews and see how other board game people talk about games, and for many people the aesthetics of it is a massive part of the experience. And it really, really affects how much they like the game or dislike the game. For me, I don't think it's that important. And so I thought, okay, as an exercise, I sat down one day, are there any games where the look of the game, the production values, actually affect how I perceive the game? In other words, if those production values drifted towards the mean, one way or the other, would my rating of the game change? And I think there are a few where that's true in a noticeable way. So that was my idea, to use that question as kind of a springboard to talking about, the production of a game. And I don't want to say just the art. I'm talking about the whole production of it, the physical, design, the graphic design, the art, the component quality, all of that good stuff.
You do include graphic design in this?
Yeah, I would include that. Yes. Specifically for a couple of the things on my list, the graphic design is a big part of why I really think it's why it affects.
Yeah.
How I would rate it. For example, looking, kind of giving a bit of a spoiler, we're definitely going to be talking about Ryan Lockett games, and I think there are some games where he did the graphic design. His art's always incredible. I think some games he did the graphic design better than others, and those I think I notice that difference in how I perceive the game as a whole. So, do you guys want to just jump into talking about some specific games? I suppose we could start with Ryan Lockett.
Yeah, I guess I have a lot of. I don't know. I think there are a lot of interesting tangents to this topic, but I think the best way to find them might be just to start talking about games.
Yeah, let's just start talking about games. So I'm looking at the list. I'm looking at the list we made here in our document, and Orion didn't have any Lockett games on his, but you and I chose the same one. Oh no, you put two of them down. Two of the three that we own. So you put down Above and Below and Near and Far. I only put down Above and Below. I
Yeah.
think I think the aesthetics and the style of that game, just by a hair, improve the quality of it more than Near and Far. Just because it feels more cohesive. Near and Far had a bunch of different
Yeah.
landscapes types as you travel through, and while they're cohesive in that you can look at them and say, "Oh, that's Ryan Lockett," they didn't create as much of like a cohesive world to me as Above and Below, which is specifically about one location type. Which, if I remember correctly, at least through some kind of Easter egg, is kind of hinted at as the same world as Near and Far. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up tying all of his games in at some point to some kind of meta universe, because he does use kind of the same little, species of creatures in all of them, at least all the ones I've seen.
Yeah. So I'm going to agree with your initial statement of the production value, the aesthetics of Above and Below, even the graphic design, is more of a boon to that game than in the case of Near and Far. We've talked about both games, and I think we share the different opinions about them. I enjoy Above and Below more overall. Just as far as like the artwork, to look at it, the world, the style of art, they're very similar. But I think that the style, the whole package of the production, elevates both games. It's elevating it from different places, so it kind of functions differently. In Above and Below, it really creates. Would you call it a lightweight Euro? Is that right?
Medium light.
With say again?
Medium to light.
Medium to light Euro with heavy story randomness, maybe something like
right.
that. That's a dangerous place to be as a game, I think. I think if you pitched that to me before I saw anything, I would be very hesitant to say that was going to be a good game. But the production and the art and the story narrative bits. I'm not sure if you're including that in this discussion, but all those things tie the package together into something that is quite enjoyable and pleasant and fun to sit down and play.
Well, I think, and you kind of hinted at this, is that they end up selling the idea of the game. The idea of the game itself, which is that you're going to kind of try to blend on a mechanical level, try to blend in these worker placement Euro ideas with a large chunk of randomness in exploration, is a tough sell mechanically, and certainly doesn't work out perfectly. I don't think it can, right? Those are kind of, that level of randomness is kind of opposed to Euro design. But
right.
Given the art and given how much it sells you on the world, on the setting, it kind of bridges that and allows those two things to work better than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, one thing that's maybe telling here is when we finish a game of Above and Below. Well, first of all, when we finish any game, we tend to debrief. That's probably the reason we started this podcast, is because we love finishing a game and then dissecting what just happened. Mm-hmm. But when we finish Above and Below, we'll frequently point out I got this story bit and I ended up not getting the thing I needed to score the most points. We'll point that out, but we're so focused on the little narrative and which characters we ended up bringing on our team and stuff like that. Um, that production just kind of numbs those. What would you call them? It just takes all our quibbles and numbs them a little bit, and that
Right.
elevates the game.
Yeah, yeah. Another example where I think a game kind of does something similar is another two games on my list: the Forbidden series, the Forbidden Desert and Forbidden Sky, where
Yeah.
I think they are solid co-op games that sell the setting incredibly well. So with Forbidden Desert, with the way the sandstorm looks on the table and how it's manipulated on a basic grid, the little flying machine. In Forbidden Sky, this kind of above the clouds electrical storm setting with magnetic bits and pieces that you're trying to connect it to a circuit. Those touches that don't need to be in those games sell the setting well enough that you are able to overlook in Forbidden Desert, I think, just the amount of randomness that's there that can be very frustrating, especially at higher difficulty levels. In Forbidden Skies, I've only played it once, but its weakness might be that it's too reliant on very intricate planning. But I think given just how fun it is to play with the pieces of those games, it again patches over where we might find mechanical faults.
There are some games where cubes would not improve the game.
A couple.
Like those two in particular.
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
love cubes. Very much.
Yeah, no, you could very easily imagine Forbidden Desert with just little plastic orange cubes to represent the sand.
Yeah.
And it would not be as good.
Yeah.
No,
Or
no,
without
I
the
think,
little pieces of the flying machine.
Yeah, exactly.
If those are just different colored cubes, yeah, they wouldn't sell the setting as well. And that's not necessarily true of all games. Like, I'm thinking, sorry, Matt, I'm going to bring it up, but Mage Knight, like, if that didn't have the minis and had standees or something for the characters, probably wouldn't make much of a difference with me. If the city pieces weren't 3D sculpts, they were something else.
haven't we
still
agreed that
probably
Mage
enjoy
Knight
the
would
game
be
about
better
the
as a
same.
computer game?
People have said that. It would probably work out pretty well as a computer game, but I do enjoy the tabletop experience there. But I'm not. I think there's specific games where really kind of toy bits to the game that are more
Yeah.
ornate than they need to
Well,
be to improve the
in-
experience.
In Mage Knight's case, they reskinned the game to Star Trek, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and we haven't played that version, but no, I think your comments and just the fact that they just rethemed it kind of speaks to that. I think the joy of the game isn't in kind of being drawn in by the production. It's in the card play, the planning, all that stuff that I think is fine and you adore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree on Mage Knight. I think that game doesn't need a particular production to be what it is.
This reminds me of our dankness scale that we talked about several months ago. And in our kind of pre-discussions leading up to that, I had kind of proposed the idea of a dry game being opposed with a game that makes you want to role play as opposed to look for efficiencies. And we kind of went back and forth and we discussed that idea. But in terms of this case where we're talking somewhat overlapping, but maybe a bit more broadly about design rather than specifically theme. I don't know. I think some of those same sort of ideas apply. Of Above and Below is a game that, if it was just, I mean, it is a lot of cubes, but if it was just cubes and action points, it would not be as enjoyable, and it would not have the staying power that it does, because so much of it is about the stories and the artwork and how that all works together to create this experience.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that when we were talking about Above and Below. I think that's a great example where, because it sells the story and the setting so well, if you do something fun, like go adventuring, and it doesn't turn out very well for you in terms of victory points or resources or whatever, it doesn't feel as bad as it would. Not even close.
Right.
It's still fun.
And you don't mind doing things like exploring every round or something,
right.
Even though the optimizational part of our brains is like, no, clearly you need to buy buildings and collect resources and explore a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But exploring is so much of the fun of that game, and just experiencing it rather than trying to optimize.
Yeah. Jumping back to touch on Near and Far real quick, I think with that game, I just mechanically, I think it's not. I don't think it's very good, and we don't need to dive into all the details of why we think that. But the same kind of narrative feel, the beautiful map that you're playing on, again, the characters that you're hiring and then physically putting in your little team queue, those things all elevate it to something that is enjoyable. And all in all, I like it less than Above and Below, but I think still in the same way, the beautiful art, that beautiful map book, all the other pieces do draw you in and make it something more than it would be.
I completely agree. In Near and Far's case, I think for me, and again, I haven't played it in a very long time because I burned out on it very quickly, it makes me want to like the game more than I eventually did.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. In the comments here, Mark mentions that the toy factor is pretty much the business strategy of Simon. And while, again, in Forbidden Desert and Forbidden Sky, the toyness of it, I think, really elevates those games. One of the games I had on my list of games where the aesthetics actually decrease my enjoyment of it is Rising Sun. We talked about this before, but just because you have big, intricate miniatures, and maybe you enjoy the miniatures in and of themselves because they are well done in terms of being an intricate, detailed sculpture. For me, at least with that big Kickstarter version we played with Rising Sun, the aesthetics of the game were just completely overwhelming in terms of visual impact, right? It's like a movie where the action scene is just throwing everything at you in rapid succession, where you lose all sense of momentum or space or visual understanding, and it's just trying to overload your system. That's kind of what Rising Sun was to me, where you had these giant minis that couldn't even fit on the big cloth mat board that they were using, or whatever the material was. The minis didn't associate with the strength of the monster. All the colors were very vibrant, but there was so much detail on the map that it was still difficult to kind of pick out the different areas of the board or where things were. All of that combined to a very unpleasant aesthetic experience to me, even though each individual part does look very good, and it's obviously very well produced in terms of detail. As a whole, it completely failed for me.
And I think I'd like to contrast that with something that showed up on at least a couple of our lists in some of the Lacerda games, where I initially I was going to put this in the good section, and then I moved it a couple lines down because I wanted to kind of compare and contrast it, not just say, this is great, which, we've already done with all of his games. But in terms of the design, I think when you look at a Lacerda game, it's overwhelming and messy and incredibly difficult to parse, and it doesn't make sense. And then you play it, and maybe about 3/4 of the way through the first game, or maybe into the second game, you start to appreciate the design and all the symbolism and the information that they packed into the board, and you really, you appreciate the design and how everything is laid out for you, and it's organized in a way that really supports the player making the decisions in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we first played Lisboa, which I think is, from a visual standpoint, ends up being brilliantly done. For half the game, it was just too much for me. It was a very similar thing to the Rising Sun experience. In that case, my perception of it changed during that first game, where all of a sudden, oh, that's there for this reason. That makes great visual sense. That's reminding me of this thing. That makes this one element really elegant, visually and mechanically. In that game, I think in that one particularly, the Gallerist is very good as well. The Gallerist also has all that cool original art for it. I think the Venos visual design isn't quite as good as either of those two, although it's still got the nice, thick, chunky cardboard and all that. I don't think it's quite as good to look at and quite as elegant visually as the Gallerist or Lisboa. But once you kind of are in the flow of the game, the visuals end up not only just looking attractive, but they help you play the game and understand the game's systems really nicely.
And I think it's primarily around how well they're organized and how well they communicate information once you understand the game a little bit.
Yeah, and that's always the case in kind of heavy Euro games that are trying to be language independent, is that they use a lot of the iconography. I think in Lisboa in particular, I think it does more than that. On top of just having good iconography, the board kind of shows you where things matter. So you have the part with the nobles where the cards go, and the influence tracker underneath that, and those two things are related. You have the economy and the little priest guy who marches around in the middle, because those are kind of connected to multiple things. And then you have on the right side of the board, you have where all the rubble is, and where you're rebuilding the city, next to where you get the pieces to do that. Everything kind of flows visually, and things that are related to each other are next to each other. Information that you would want to see and compare to other information is, easy, right next to each other, easy to look at, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, and I think all of that is true.
Really subtle ways, it's nice.
Oh, for sure. And I think you realize more of that every time you play. And of course, we love the thick cardboard in all the Lacerda games.
Yeah,
so nice.
That's very much a gamer thing. Where like, you don't realize how nice it is until you actually are playing with the pieces, and they have like the double thick cardboard, and you're like, yes, this. I'm sold now.
Mark's salivating over here.
All games need to have the very thick cardboard pieces.
Anyways, but I wouldn't call Lisboa beautiful. I think it is elegant, and I can appreciate the design for all the thought that went into it, and how well it's organized, and how well it communicates information. But I don't look at it and say, that's a beautiful game.
Uh, not
And
on
maybe
first
that's kind of the
glance.
art style.
It
It's
could
kind
be.
of like a scratchy art style.
I mean, of the three, the Gallerist is probably the most attractive at first glance.
Well, it also has like 40 commissioned paintings.
Yes. Yeah.
That one is definitely a cleaner design overall.
Yes.
But let's take that and compare it to maybe Viticulture, or either of the Stonemaier games that we've played significantly, where the game is so attractive, just like in how it looks and
Yeah.
the art and
Well, in the case of Scythe, a game created
based on art.
based on the art.
Yeah. But even just the backgrounds in all the cards
Yeah.
or pictures.
Lisboa is
the
really
board.
grown on me, but I do understand your point.
And I don't think. I mean, I love Lisboa,
Yeah.
but I think if we're talking about it in terms of aesthetic, Viticulture or Scythe, especially, come out just hands down ahead.
They're very good. Yeah, I can see what you mean there. Have you seen the new Stonemaier game coming out, the bird one?
No.
Oh yeah, it looks good. It looks very pretty as birds.
Is that because you like birds so much?
I do like
Yeah,
birds a lot, and this one
I want
has.
to
It's
hear
just all
someone
birds.
else's opinion about this.
All right, Mark, I need a percentage breakdown of how much of your love for Lisboa is based on the artwork, and how much of your expected love for the upcoming Stonemaier bird game is based on the birds.
I think if Lisboa had the production quality of Kanban, it would probably be my least favorite Lacerda game.
Okay.
At least by now, after 2 or 3 plays. The amount that I am excited for Wingspan, the new bird game from Stonemaier, is almost entirely because of birds.
All right.
No,
fair enough.
and it's Stonemaier that looks great, and
Yeah, no,
the
Stonemaier
designer's
does a
doing
fantastic
interesting
job
stuff.
producing their games.
Yeah, but I'm excited about birds.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last Stonemaier game we played, Charterstone, I was not a big fan of. So
It had kind of the white box, though. You love white.
it had a decent look. I think Tokaido does that white kind of pastel look a lot better than even Charterstone did. But again, that
Fog
might
of
just
Love
because
does
I
it even
didn't-
better than that.
What's that?
Fog of Love does it even better than that.
Fog of Love. That's one. Well, let's talk. Looking down at my list, let's talk about some games that do that clean style really nicely, kind of the minimalist. Tokaido, you have that a bit. Fog of Love, you certainly have that. Deep Sea Adventures, one we played recently, that has a very, very clean, minimalist look that is just lovely. I really, really like it.
But the game is also tiny. Like it fits in a box of cards.
Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't have to. Like, look at
Deep-
at Hanami Koji. That doesn't have a clean look. It has a beautiful art style, but it doesn't have that kind of minimalist aesthetic to it.
I just like
Deep Sea Adventure is interesting because there's barely any board. Like what you're focusing on are just these cardboard bubbles that you place down in the ocean. It's just like a line of bubbles that you can actually place them in whatever configuration you feel like.
That's one of the cool things about it, right? You have a part in making Deep Sea Adventure look nice on the table because the board, quote unquote, is freeform little chits, which is cool.
Yeah, it's unique.
Well, I don't know if I'm with you on this Deep Sea Adventure thing, but another minimalist game I would put out there is Saikatsu,
Yes.
which also has incredible components with those thick like dice tiles.
That barely missed my top 10 list. But I mean, yeah, we talked with the designer recently, and he was very pleased by the material the tiles were made out of, and I completely agree. In fact, going back to Rising Sun, the best part of that Rising Sun, deluxe Kickstarter version were the tiles made out of, I presume, the same material. That material looks very nice. It's like the domino material. And Seikatsu works really, really nicely because, in part because of the tiles being that material. They make a nice sound when they hit each other, in the bag, the grab bag that you're drawing out of. I love mystery bags. And we were playing Dominant Species last night, and I realized that, the Dominant Species, it's just little thin pieces of cardboard in their mystery bag, and it doesn't feel as nice, and it doesn't sound as nice when you just kind of stick your hand in there and rummage. I want the rummage experience. And Seikatsu is the best at that, I think. I very much like mystery bags. But it does do that very clean white background very nicely. Tokaido again. And then Fog of Love. It has the white background, pastel, in this case kind of baby blue, baby pink colors. Very, very well. It also does what I think we were talking about with games like Above and Below, in that it sells kind of a cohesive setting. I don't know what the setting is. Setting is the wrong word for Fog of Love. It sells a cohesive look, which is almost like Apple Store Future Clean, but yeah. It's almost a very, very futuristic style.
The theme is an interesting thing to draw you into. I mean, it's trying to draw you into a relationship that spans a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Well, depending on the scenario.
Yeah, more or less. That's a very different challenge for the production than a fantasy setting, a sci-fi setting, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I didn't have an immediate follow-up to that. Just it's a unique challenge that the I've lost your wording ends up servicing very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with Fog of Love, it's an interesting choice because with a romantic setting, you can go kind of two ways. You can do that kind of clean, sleek style, or you could go super home, or you could go super homey with it. I think. I don't know necessarily what that would look like, but at least visually in movies, those kind of tend to be the two styles you go with on romance. It's either like the young people, young business person in the modern city wearing their suits and their business attire, or it's like, out in the country somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fog of Love does it really well. Going to clean looking games in a different way. When I was making I wanted to narrow it down to 10 games that I think are where the aesthetics affect my opinion of it the most. And one that surprised me that kept holding on was Go. But thinking about it, if Go hadn't developed into that very clean Eastern black on white look, even if it had still been one of the oldest games and super complex and interesting strategically, if it didn't look like that, I don't know if I would be as interested in playing it at all. I think the look gives it a kind of mystique that pulls me in.
So is that a game where you are more attracted to the aesthetic than the strategy?
I think the aesthetic goes hand in hand with the mystique of the game, of it being like the ultimate abstract game, with the most history, and it's more complicated than chess, and all of it combined. Like if I like, I don't think chess looks great necessarily. Obviously, you can have very fancy chessboards and everything. But I mean, if chess wasn't chess, if it wasn't the strategy game that you learn when you're a kid at some point, I wouldn't have any interest in it. For Go, it's the combination of the history of it and the aesthetic that really pull me in to wanting to know more about it.
I think chess
abstracts are interesting because you can reskin an abstract so easily. Like, even as you bring up Go, the image I have of Go is that black and white, but on like a poorly drawn computer screen, black and white.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now I've also seen a Go board that's, beautiful actual stone. But I think I was thinking about abstracts a little bit. I played Tack once over the Christmas break, which has nice wooden pieces. At least my copy does. The aesthetics are nice, but it's almost as if I like the game enough, then I can spend some effort to get the aesthetics that I want. That's certainly the case with chess. I think the times I've been more interested in chess, I have just browsed some chess boards that have one of 3 or 4 different styles that I find very attractive.
I will say that it is much nicer to play chess with some nice, like, solid pieces than with the stupid, like, plastic travel set that you had in as a child.
Or the one that's sitting over in the living room right now. That's very poor.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah, I don't like that set at all. We had a nicer one growing up that had actually weight to the pieces. It's really the weight to the pieces. In Go, it's like the solidness of the piece. Like, you have to, like...
It adds gravity to the situation.
Yeah. It's literally adds weight in more ways than one to playing the game.
Yeah.
But I don't know, that was an interesting one to me. Because I was thinking, man, if Go didn't have that look, I don't think I'd be nearly as interested in playing it or learning more about it or figuring out the strategy, which is something that I will hopefully be doing sometime this month. I hadn't mentioned it
spoilers
officially yet. I guess I'll mention it now. Well, before this podcast goes out, I will have something up on the website, but this month will be focused on abstract games, not exclusively. But each month in 2019, we're going to have a theme, and I decided abstract games will be the theme for January.
Sneak peek for those Patreons who are watching right now.
Well, they already know about it. I told them all about that already. But
all the more reason to join the Patreon, Mark, and
yes,
the Discord.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. Anyway, that's Go.
Okay, so let's just like step back and
sure.
As we've been talking, I'm kind of getting a sense of 3 different broad categories. If we had to like bucket all the games we've talked about into 3 different categories, I would say one.
Love bucketing.
Bucketing, yeah, right, for charting and graph. It's great stuff.
Do you like buckets or cubes more?
I mean cubes, but in this sense, cubes are meaningless. So we're gonna go with bucketing. All right.
You could have a cubic bucket.
Do you also need like a holographic projector to view it properly?
Could take our buckets and cube them. Then we'll have 9 distinct things. Never mind, go ahead.
Sure. All right, so we're just going to go with the simple 3-bucket breakdown. All right? So the first bucket, which for you would include Rising Sun, is games where the aesthetic actively gets in the way of playing the game.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I have 2 other examples of that we'll get to.
Okay, and we can come back to this. And then the next bucket is games that are either neutral or the aesthetic is nice but doesn't get in the way. It's there, and maybe it improves your experience of you're like, oh, that game looks nice. but it's like it's just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's games like, let's say, Fog of Love or Above and Below, where the aesthetic becomes a significant part of the game and the experience, and it sells this holistic feat of design, really, and creates a whole world for you to step into for an hour or several hours, whatever the game may be. And just kind of to frame our discussion, looking at 3 different kind of broad categorizations of how the aesthetic might impact playing of the game.
Yeah, and I think within the positive bucket, I think you could sub-bucket it. Is that what it's called? Because bucketing's a programming thing, right?
It's a data analysis thing for like charts analysis and data and stuff.
Okay, whatever. I'm going to call it sub-bucketing. I think, at least I'm looking at the list I created. You can almost separate the positive ones into 2 categories. First, games that sell their setting or their theme or their narrative very well, which is mostly what we've been talking about. And games where the production and the art and the look of it just make it more fun, which we haven't talked about quite as much. But the main example I would give to that is Tzolk'in, where I'm not bought into Tzolk'in on a narrative level.
Okay, I think I would put that in the center bucket, where the design is there, and it might be good or it might be neutral, but it's not this... It doesn't sell the game. Does that make sense?
It doesn't sell...
Like, Tzolk'in is a good strategy game even if it didn't have cool gears. And the cool gears are like, oh, that's extra fun.
Yeah.
Okay, let's translate.
But imagine if Tzolk'in, you just kind of manually move things along the track each round. Like, you just kind of shifted everything over. I don't think anyone would remember it particularly well. I think it would have gone mostly unnoticed.
Okay.
Right? I don't think I would have very much fun with it. Or as much fun with it. I think, okay, that's a nice Euro game. With the gears and with the look of it, and the way that the rotation kind of influences your way of thinking, I think I rate it higher because of the production value by a good chunk.
I think that actually I'm not sure if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with your sub buckets, Mark, but with Tzolk'in, the gears and all that stuff actually makes the playing so much more comprehensible. I can't even imagine the mechanics of Tzolk'in without those gears. It might be impossible.
Well, if you just had to physically, like, there are 5 tracks or whatever, and every round you just shift your pieces over one manually.
Yeah. So, yeah, that would work. That would work.
It would work, but I don't think it'd be an interesting or memorable game as much as it is by a good margin. No,
but I guess I guess I would put those more with the even Lacerda games of, once you kind of understand, once the mechanics click, you realize how well presented they are on the game board.
Well, that might just be a category of Euro games that do Euro game things really, really beautifully and well. Right? Because a lot of it's just very clear iconography, and the board flows like we were talking about with Lisboa, and the pieces feel nice, and the art isn't dull. Like, think of what's that one with the grid and the stacking of the Kalamala, right? There's a Euro game that looks okay and does what it does, right? But it doesn't do anything exceptionally visually like these games. These games do that dry Euro thing, but just on a completely different level where it's very nice.
But I think the main thrust of the aesthetic is in service to the mechanisms.
Oh, sure, yeah. Maybe that's the distinction.
And I'm trying to distinguish that from something like Above and Below, where it's about the storytelling.
Yeah, I understand.
And so
your
in
point
that
now.
sense, I'm putting things like Lisboa in the center bucket.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
To further derail your bucketing.
We have buckets within buckets here.
Well, here's some other buckets.
Are they Russian buckets?
On a
buckets
different
all the way
axis.
down. It's like, have you
with
seen
Tzolk'in?
Have you seen the video? Like, it's like an old, like high school, when we were in high school, like internet video of the guy who's running around somewhere with a bucket on his head, and there's a cop chasing him, and he pulls the bucket off, and there's just another bucket underneath.
No, I have not.
You've never seen this?
No.
It's an old school GIF,
right.
whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
think
go
Matt
ahead.
was
Sorry,
trying
Matt.
to say something intelligent.
Yeah.
No,
I've ruined all the
YouTubing
intelligence.
bucket in Buckethead.
If you look up Buckethead, you might find the very talented guitarist,
Yeah.
who is something else entirely.
Maybe that's who was
No,
running
I
along
found
the
the
street.
video. He's running on top of the cart, and then
That's
he gets
right.
punched by a cop, and the bucket comes up, and there's another bucket underneath.
It's beautiful.
Okay, maybe you'll have to, I don't know, put that after the outro music or something. What I was gonna say, a game like Tzolk'in kind of has these great mechanics, and then found a theme that just so happens to perfectly fit with it. You know, it's like it's almost like too coincidental that like Mayan calendar gears just works perfectly with the mechanics of Tzolk'in. I don't know, that kind of feels different to me than like the near and far thing, where the theming and all that is kind of a more independent thing. Like it just like it's that whimsical world that's created is something that's great in and of itself.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah. I think we're all on the same page here of Ryan's categories of. Correct me if this isn't what you were saying.
Oh no, I was
games
trying
where
to derail that conversation of Ryan's categories.
I don't think it does derail games.
Well,
there's
I mean,
two
you're free to take
categories.
off the bucket. There might be another one there. Who knows? But we there's only one way to find out.
Games where the aesthetics sell the setting or the story or the feeling of the game very, very well. And then games where they just simply have excellent aesthetics that make the game more fun to play.
Okay.
Is that close to what you were saying?
I don't know. I think
I'm maybe
I
trying
took
to
too many levels of buckets
something
off,
like
and
that.
then I just ended back where I started.
Just recursive bucket? That's not recursive. That's I don't know.
Cyclic bucketing.
Cyclical.
Cyclical.
It's a cyclical bucket, just like a tire, like a donut.
I don't know.
Gosh, why are we podcasting so late, guys? This kind of things happens.
This does remind me of my new favorite mythological beast, the recursive centaur.
Oh yes, explain that one again. It's wonderful.
Yes, half horse, half recursive centaur.
It's the best. I love it.
I saw it retweeted on Twitter. You got to go look up the picture of it. It's phenomenal.
It is delightful. Yeah. I think we hit a lot of broad categories. Do we want to run over our lists real quick?
Yeah,
Or
let's
rather,
do that.
Let's run through
ground
our
ourselves
lists, and then
in
I
our
would like to
lists.
talk about games where the aesthetics actively like harm our experience and make the game very much worse than what it could be. Because I have a list of 5.
So if you took the game and just replaced everything with like gray cubes or something, that would be an improvement over maybe the colorful design or whatever. And I'm not trying to denigrate cubes. I'm just saying
not
gray is a rather
necessarily.
bland color.
Well, yeah. In some cases, maybe. In a couple cases, if they just had like, I have two games where if the art was just like good, it would.
All right. Anyways, we'll get there. Matt, go through your list. Why don't you?
What's your list?
Okay, so I did not order these. These were just games that I thought of. Above and below, near and far. We talked about those. Fog of Love. We also talked about, but I think that could have gone horribly wrong. But the presentation is just so good in so many ways, and I still don't know what I think of the game. But it's a game you have to play, you have to experience. I think I've only played it 3 times, but they were awesome experiences, and it's completely sold by the look of the board, just how clean it is, as you said, Mark, as well as the phenomenal tutorial, which is worth doing. That's a game that could have just been a mess, and even like it's a touchy theme. Like you could really screw up a game about relationships that's trying to be as I don't know, profound as Fog of Love is, but the production works, completely sells it. Moving on, I was interested in Mysterium, and there are probably other games that you could similarly talk about, where the game is mostly aesthetics.
I think that's an interesting one because the theme doesn't really make sense. It's like you're these mediums who are contacting a ghost who saw a murder, but it just like doesn't really work. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Like there's some weird story
and the mechanics are
that kind of holds it all together, but really
it literally
it's
makes
just this
no
kind
sense.
It's like a surreal murder mystery.
Yeah.
And the story doesn't really matter because it's all about these pieces of art that the ghost player is silently giving to people.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing.
The mechanics aren't really anything crazy, and it's not like a deep strategy game. It's all about that. Well, to go back to another recent or not recent, but past podcast, the hindered in communication, where you're trying to get someone else to understand what you're thinking with this very, in this case, surreal paintings, dreamscapes.
Yeah. Well, and that one is it works because the art in it is suitably vague and open to interpretation.
Yeah, and also simultaneously very nice to look at. So yeah,
that
I don't know
one
what to do
didn't
with that.
quite make my list just because I think a lot of, at least in the English version, I don't know about the original Polish one or whatever, some of the stuff seems like they're trying just a little too hard with like the crows and the clock thing, and it's like, yeah, it could have been a much smaller, more streamlined package and have been easier, I think, to get set up and play and less annoying to fiddle with.
Sure.
I don't know. I think
still the actual content of what you're doing is 90% the quality of the pictures and stuff like that. I think it's interesting to contrast that with similar games. So, like, for example, Codenames Pictures is probably a better game. Not as good as regular Codenames, but I think Codename Pictures is still a good game. But I'm not as drawn in by that art. It's just very plain, sketchy.
It's all line drawings, right?
Say again?
It's all line... They're all just line drawings?
Yeah, and there's a certain theme there, or motif or something, where each line drawing is simultaneously two different things.
Yeah.
Which which is cool and it's interesting, and I have enjoyed playing it actually more than I thought I was going to enjoy playing it. But still, I mean, the experience is so reliant on the actual art. I would rather play Mysterium, whether or not it's a better game or not.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, Scythe. Did we talk about Scythe?
Briefly.
For me, Scythe is an interesting one because I don't know if the aesthetics, the production actually matches the mechanics as I don't know. It's just super fun. It's just super fun, pleasing. It feels cool. Even though the mechs you're not using as much as maybe you feel like you should. It all works for me. I don't know, maybe.
I don't think it works. I don't think it was mentioned in the chat that a lot of people were frustrated by Scythe because it seemed like more of a war game than it was, and I understand that. It doesn't bother me that much, but I don't feel the cohesiveness of the setting and the art and the mechanisms.
Yeah, maybe this is one that we put in kind of a middling category.
That said, it's very nice to look at.
It's
generally.
very nice to look at.
This is a case where the art is beautiful and the production is incredible, but it's not exactly cohesive with the mechanics.
It's almost the opposite thing of Above and Below, right? It doesn't. You have you have a game where the mechanics are interesting and you have the art, and they don't help each other. Where in Above and Below, they do help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think this is an interesting one because I'm not sure that I would want to play Scythe as much if either of those independent things was average. But to me, I like the game. I like just kind of the tight engine building. And I love the theme of this, Soviet farming plus mechs. Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, the two really don't serve each other that well. The theme doesn't really work with a tight Euro engine builder. Maybe a tight engine builder is a better way to put it. But I love both of them, so I end up enjoying my experience every time I play Scythe.
Yeah.
Sushi Go Party is one that I find easy to play with lots of people because the sushi is cute, and specifically like non-gamers are more willing to play a game with, smiley face edamame than they are, say, Seven Wonders Greek mythology cards.
Mm-hmm.
Shipwreck Arcana is a little mathy puzzle game that we like, that is just beautifully illustrated, and that elevates it for me.
It barely missed my list. It might have been number 11. It was a very hard cut. I love the art in that game.
Yeah, and it's just a simple little game, but again, that clean kind of white border.
Well, that one evokes stained glass, which is very nice.
And like stained glass type art. Really works, makes it pleasant, as well as their little wooden pieces or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I forget
numbers.
now. It's all very it's all very well done. I love Spirit Island's tactileness. Did that make your list, Mark?
It did. In hindsight, I might have swapped it out for something.
Yeah,
that one might be biased just by how much I like the game. But if it was an average-looking fantasy game, I think I would still love it a lot. Top 10. It would still be in my top 10. So I don't think the art is what's affecting it that much. But the art is very, very good.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're right on that. I adore the art, and go back to our conversation with Eric Rouse. Did I say that right?
I believe it's Royce.
Okay.
If you're listening, Eric, at least I apologize for possibly mispronouncing your name in that podcast, because I heard another podcast later where someone pronounced it Royce, and I believe I said Roos. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah,
I feel really bad.
The artwork in Spirit Island and the little flavor text is just absolutely brilliant. But you're right. The game itself stands on its own and probably could have worked with a generic fantasy setting. So maybe it doesn't actually meet the criteria for this.
I actually put Spirit Island down and then took it off for exactly that reason, because I do like the art, and now that I think about it, the cards are what really stand out to me. I think the board is good, but it's not outstanding.
I love the board.
I know you do, and again, I'm not here to criticize any part of Spirit Island because I adore the game. But in terms of the aesthetic, I think the names of things and the card art is kind of the most notable part of that game for me.
Yeah.
And I was doing this quickly, but I took it off my list because I didn't think it quite fit the criteria.
Mm-hmm. You got one more on your list, Matt.
Oh, do I? Sorry about that. Takedo.
Patchwork.
And Patchwork.
Patchwork. Yeah, Patchwork. That's one where, actually, I don't love the game, but it's nice, and it's just one of those games that's kind of simple and kind of has this novel presentation theme that just perfectly matches the mechanics. You're actually trying to fit kind of odd and end pieces on the grid, and it works perfectly that they're little pieces of quilt. Like, you actually might make a quilt in a similar way.
Mm-hmm. I almost had a different Uwe game on my list. It was on my long list, and it got trimmed at some point. That'd be Noosefjord.
Really? You love that game so much.
I gave it, I think, an 8 out of 10, but I love the art in that game. It evokes that kind of like sunny, windswept, oceanside feeling so well. I don't know. There's something about it. I really like looking at it.
It doesn't quite do it for me in the same way.
Oh, I don't think it does it for most people in the same way, but
I think it's a good game.
I keep looking up at it on the shelf, and I'm like, man, I want to open the box and just look at the game.
I mean, I want to open the box and play the game.
Well, that too, yes.
But I'm not like, oh man, I love the art on this, and I just want to look at the little fish pieces and the grizzled elders and whatever else.
Yeah, I don't know. That one's got a weird hold on me. Orion, let's talk about your shortlist here.
Yeah, so I'm a little surprised that some of these didn't show up on anyone else's. But first one, Netrunner. Mark, where is this? Where's Netrunner?
I thought it was on my long list. I thought about it, and it's not the art that does it. It's the setting itself.
Yeah,
that I appreciate more.
Okay, so I think in Netrunner, God, there's so many good parts of this game.
You might get more out of it because
I'm more of a computer person than you are. And I've read Neuromancer, and it really just evokes that. I don't have the right word. Experience is the right word, but like cohesive setting. I don't know, the whole thing.
Here's what took it off my list. I thought about it, and I realized the little short stories they ship with the expansions.
Yeah.
I enjoy just as much as the art.
Okay.
Like, that brings me into the world. I'm like, no, it's really the setting that I enjoy a lot. It's not necessarily looking at the cards themselves. Although the art's very nice in it.
I love the mind space it creates, if that's a thing.
No, that makes sense.
And I think I like kind of I don't know. I love everything about that. I think it's both a great game and I love the experience of playing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the design works well to create exactly that atmosphere.
Sure.
Twilight Imperium, the greatest game. No. In terms of experience, we've talked about this is almost always the top of our list when we talk about games that evoke a big experience. And it's this epic, all-day affair that takes over your whole table, and there's pieces everywhere, and there's a bunch of stuff, and then you've got this all these different diverse races with huge backstories, and you can really get into playing the space lines as the trade empire, or being the turtles and just kind of hiding in your corner, or I don't know. I think there's so much room for that, and I think the design really helps that, and it really enhances the experience of playing out a grand space opera and creating history.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was
maybe
probably in the last couple of cuts I made. I think I cut it because like what it has going for it is the table presence and everything.
Yeah.
But the actual art and the backstories and all that, they're great because they exist, not because they're necessarily compelling. Like, none of the alien races are that compelling. It's all fairly standard fantasy. You have the nomads, and you have the humans, and the military people, and the technology people, and the mine net, and the bugs, that answer to their queen, and it's all very rote sci-fi. So that kind of barely squeaked it off my list.
Okay. Well, anyways. And you mentioned with Shipwreck Arcana, Matt, how it kind of evoked a stained glass. Well, I put the actual stained glass game of Sagrada.
Yep.
Just because it's it was beautiful to see, and you're rolling these different colored dice and you're fitting them in to make a stained glass window, and
It's very nice.
I really liked it. And then the last one that I had is Food Chain Magnet, which again we've talked about this a bunch of times.
It's a controversial pick. It was on my short list though.
Okay, well, I think it's hilarious, and I love the whole shtick of being like this weird 1950s town with way over pushy fast food companies that are putting billboards outside your window to force you to go buy food from them.
You know what the great touch on that game is? The player aids being menus.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm sure that doesn't work for everyone, but I really like that game, and how it's the art style of it. I would never take that art style and say, oh, that's definitely my favorite art style. But I think it fits that game so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how it serves the setting and the theme and the setup of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that game wouldn't make my list just because while I love those little touches, I agree. I think it's hilarious. I don't think that affects how much I want to play the game. I don't know, the attraction to play that game is really that kind of brutal puzzle.
The brutal market competition.
Yeah.
Brutal market competition. That's why I want to play the game. And the fact that it's got this unique and hilarious theming is wonderful, but doesn't really move the needle for me.
Mm-hmm. The only game that we haven't mentioned on my list is Mechs vs. Minions. That's a good one.
Speaking of overproduced games that don't get in the way, at least.
Yes, that's just an abundance. That's just
an overflowing of wealth.
Yes, which I look forward to playing more. I did make a list of 5 games that where the aesthetics actually decreased my view of the game, and this was a harder list to make, honestly. There aren't that many games. Like, a lot of people complain about Dominion. Dominion, I don't even look at the art, honestly. It means nothing to me. It doesn't affect my perception of the game. Same with like Through the Ages, which is an attractive game, but it doesn't affect my experience of the game.
Yeah.
I just kind of ignore it. These games, actively, I don't want to play them as much as I would if they were just fine. So starting off, 2 games that just look really boring, both in space, Eminent Domain and The Expanse. They're just completely dull, and there are other games that do similar things that look nicer and are more interesting. And don't, like, if you're gonna make a space game, like, you gotta do something to, like, space is black with like white dots on it, like, you gotta make something more interesting than that. And those games don't really do that.
Okay, so I just want to pull out something here. In terms of mechanics, or sorry, excuse me, mechanisms,
Yeah.
to use your preferred term, and probably the correct term, but whatever.
If you're being a pedant, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just reviewed SPQF,
Yes.
which is very similar to Eminent Domain in the way that the cards work.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the aesthetic and the art is diametrically opposed.
Yeah, SPQF looks very nice. There's some graphic design stuff that was annoying a bit with that game.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks very nice. The main thing, and they're very similar games, but I think I'll choose SPQF almost every time because it looks nicer and just because it's smaller to set up.
Yeah.
Honestly. Eminent Domain's kind of a table hog.
Yeah.
And then The Expanse, like, I wanted to like it a lot, and I have enjoyed my plays of it, but like, they're 2 very similar games that are just more interesting to look at with El Grande and Dominant Species. I think the mechanisms are a bit better, but The Expanse isn't giving me anything with its art that makes me want to pull it out a lot. I already mentioned Rising Sun. At least on that one play, it was a hot mess and didn't want to make me play it ever again. It was just too much going on there. You mentioned Food Chain Magnate, which I think is very well done. Indonesia, also from Splotter. You played that one with us, right?
I don't think so.
Were you not there?
Was this one of the several months I was out of the country?
It might have been. It was when we went to the Vital Lacerda day, and then we ended up playing not a Vital Lacerda game.
No, I wasn't there for that.
So Indonesia is abysmal. It actually looks pretty nice. It's a very intricate kind of map of Indonesia. The components given with the game literally do not fit on the board. Like, Indonesia is a collection of islands, and they're very thin and small, and the game divides them up into sections, and the components are these huge wooden pieces, and you're supposed to put, in some cases, a bunch of them on sections of the map that are literally smaller than the pieces. Like, we substituted all of the non-map components out for other components literally to make the game playable. It was a mess.
That's annoying. There's another game where like the components are bigger than the spaces.
I can't think of any
right now.
The final one is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which we don't have the newest printing. We have the printing that doesn't have the worst of the typos or whatever. But the main complaint with that one is the font. Like,
it's an atrocious font.
The font in that game, which is 90% reading text of that font, is so hard to read.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I remember this now, but when I saw that on your list, I was trying to think why exactly it would make the list, because I didn't have the name.
Yeah, because the map and the newspapers and stuff, all those parts are really cool. But the
yeah, and I've never actually read it. I've always been one of the people doing the other things.
Yeah, I just designated myself as the reader, and I didn't really offer to share that because it's so annoying. The font's this incredibly thin, kind of wispy font, and like certain letters look the same, and if there's even like a smudge it can screw it up, and it's like dark gray on this kind of medium brown background. It's just awful. You have to have very bright light to be able to read it well. And honestly, I want to play the game less because of that stupid font in the book. It's awful.
Which is sad because it's such a fun game.
It is a fun game. Yeah. Maybe I hope they fix that with the new version. I know they did a new printing recently. Anyways, that's our lists. I do want to do one honorable mention, and that's Fire in the Lake, which made the short list, because I honestly think that is a beautiful game. I don't know if the aesthetics actually change how I view the game, but in terms of like a map on a war game, that might be my favorite one.
I actually wanted to bring up war games because, again, I think it's another really good example of design created to serve the function of the game,
Yes.
and almost entirely, at least in most cases, ignoring trying to be beautiful or trying to look attractive. It's almost always trying.
It's a different when they are beautiful. Like I would argue, Fire in the Lake is. I would argue Twilight Struggle has a very nice look. It's a very utilitarian beauty.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very utilitarian to serve the mechanisms of the game, and it's yeah.
It's something.
I think it's interesting in that way, and I love looking at the games because I love looking at maps and studying wars and all that sort of stuff. And I think if I didn't have, I guess you could say, a soft spot for maps and things like that, those design might be more off-putting or might not help my enjoyment of the game.
Yeah.
But I love looking at a good map, so that puts a game, a genre that I'm already have a proclivity towards even higher in my want to play.
Yeah. I believe our final topic we talked about are games that we wish that we would most like to see get a deluxe version, or like a better art version, or that kind of thing. I have at least one that I can think of. You created this question, Matt. I'm curious what games you were thinking of.
You know, I'm not sure if I have any on my list.
You brought this up. You don't have any?
No, the ones that I've kind of considered, actually, I don't know that.
Surely you'd say Castles of Burgundy, right? That's the classic answer to this question.
Yes. Yeah, that'll be my answer. Castles of Burgundy should have a nice, beautiful, kind of whimsical castle theme, rather than just like puke yellow colors. That is all I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sherlock Holmes, if they just made it function better, that'd be one for me. But actually, before I get to my number one, what do you wouldn't want a kind of deluxeified, updated art, updated look Dominion, Matt?
In terms of me playing it, no. I think I don't know. Over time, I've fallen in love with the Dominion artwork and all that. I think it's great. I love the little touches. Maybe a couple cards like Shantytown that get hate. I wouldn't mind seeing redone. It would be cool just in terms of having a revamped. If they ever reboot Dominion, which I don't think they ever will. If they really made it beautiful in a way that would capture a wider audience, I would love that, but I don't think it would affect my play of the game.
Yeah. What are some other possibilities? What's the Euro game I mentioned earlier?
Which one?
That looks very plain.
Kalimala?
Kalamala, yeah. That one, like, I have a very high tolerance for dull-looking Euros. That might be the dullest of looking Euros.
Yeah.
That one.
I mean, it's
very
a dry
brown
game
and
to
dull.
begin with,
Yeah.
and then the art is even more dry.
I like it, but
I enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But it's not an exciting aesthetic.
yeah. All right, you guys want to hear my number one?
Let's hear it. Oh, I guess I'll just throw in here a game we've ragged on a lot for components is Through the Ages. And there is a new version with cubes, and it's way better, but I don't have it because I already have the old one.
Yeah.
But that's a game with cylinders that would be better with cubes.
And it was made better with
And
cubes,
it was
yeah.
made with cubes, and it is better.
There we go. It was already...
Yeah, the new
improved upon.
version of Through the Ages is great.
Did you ever get that, Matt? Weren't you talking about that?
I was talking about getting it. I think I have it in my Cool Stuff Inc. cart.
Okay. I think I thought I saw it on sale recently for like a lot less than I thought, but
Yeah. All right,
If you
my
see it
number
again, let me know.
my number one, I would love to see an updated deluxeified version. It would overjoy me. Space Alert.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I considered.
sure.
I think Space Alert, I like, and we disagreed about this earlier, Mark.
Yes, we've had this discussion.
I like Space Alert a lot. I think the artwork is really funny and does what it needs to do. But you could clean it up and make it look even better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you could do a lot of fun stuff with that. Especially because it has kind of a silly story and setting and theme and all that. You can make the look of it sillier. You could still play it straight. There's lots of flexibility if someone were to like redo the art on that game. It wouldn't necessarily just be like an improved version of the same thing. They could really go wild with it.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I don't know. I love the giant A, B, C buttons in each room.
Well, you still have to have that.
Completely, absurd.
I'd like to see an updated version of it just to see what they would do with it. You know, if they had the chance to redesign everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing in particular that I point to that like they really should have done that better the first time around. But it'd be really fun to see a new version of that.
I think Seven Wonders looks a hair dated.
Yeah.
By this point,
I think that could. I don't think it needs it, but I think it could benefit from it.
and I don't even think it looks bad. It just is unmemorable in its presentation. That's about all I can think of, really.
Reflecting on our conversation, I wish we would have done a little more defining of terms. We kind of talked just kind of generally production value, more so than actual aesthetics, I think.
Well, that's all part of it.
We kind of had a hazy definition of it, but
yeah, which I think works for the conversation for sure.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
But I really, just want to spend more time defining things.
Well, I think that's all the topics we had. What did we learn during this podcast? This seemed like a pretty straightforward in terms of our podcasts.
Yeah.
You promised lots of tangents, Matt, and then we didn't get that many.
we had a good one about buckets.
We did have the bucket tangent.
We had the bucket tangent. Also, you were like hitting my tangents like 3 minutes before I wanted to bring them up.
Oh, I was tangent sniping.
Yeah. And sometimes that nips it in the bud where it could have been a 10-minute rabbit hole. You just kind of summarized it in 30 seconds.
We're starting to think alike, Matt.
We've think alike. We knew that a long time ago.
I mean, I think the main. What did we learn here is a silly question. I think, honestly, all three of us are pretty lenient in terms of gamers for art and aesthetics and the look of our games.
We definitely care more about the play and the rules and the decisions of the game over the art style.
But even then, in the cases...
Here's an interesting tangent.
Go ahead.
Stop what you're talking about. We're going to tangent.
Strap in.
In my journey as a board gamer, I think I've become more jaded in terms of art and certainly art and theme. And many games stand out, and I love their art and theme, and that's a boon for the game. But in general, like a lot of the games we play, if it's not exceptional, whatever. And I'm okay with that. And I think I know that like some reviewers and just board gamers have the kind of a different journey where at a certain point they just don't want to deal with sub-excellent production,
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind mentioning it by name. Like, Shut Up and Sit Down talks about that quite frequently, it seems. Where they're like, okay, this game is very good, but it looks ugly to us, and there are so many other games that are both good and beautiful.
Yeah.
And for me, like, maybe I'll get to that point. Maybe I'll get to the point. And honestly, that's great. They have so many excellent games that they think are equally wonderful that they can be picky like that. For me, if the game is truly incredible, that still stands out to me regardless of the look of it.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, for me, like the majority of games fall within like a 10% band of like the aesthetic plus or minus 10 points is the same.
Yeah.
And then there's a handful that are really outstanding, and then there's a couple that are really off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not one of those, third standard deviation sort of games, I'm not really thinking about the aesthetics. I might think about the theme, but the aesthetics is almost always going to be a secondary concern or tertiary concern.
Yeah, I think I've become actually less jaded. I don't know if jaded is the right word, but I think I care a bit more than I used to about that. But more so in the overall experience. The art and the graphic design and the rule book and the narrative and the story and what the game is trying to do as a whole, when those things tie together very, very well, it makes me much more excited, I think, than I would used to be. Maybe that's just because I've seen more excellent examples of that, that they now stand out a lot.
On an only marginally related topic, a couple years ago, I was doing much more front-end design in my web development job. And I had read a book about design, which was like designed for non-designers because I'm such a computer geek. And just some basics about you should line up things and you should contrast things so that they stand out and, things like that anyone should know. And at that time, that was, super revolutionary to me. And then I started trying to pay attention to design of different websites. And I went to a conference in Boston that talked a good bit about kind of design and how it serves different sorts of users and the different concerns that go into that. And I was much more, trying to be aware and notice good design or bad design and be able to say why. And I think I have not paid as much attention to that sort of thing in the last couple of years. But I always find it interesting to talk to designers because, I don't know, they are more concerned with how something looks, and I am naturally more concerned with how something works. And I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. It's just a different viewpoint, and it's interesting to hear someone who approaches a topic from a different perspective.
Yeah. And I think in board game production, the artist and the graphic designer are typically done by the same person. I think typically people who would say they're board game graphic designers are the same people who say they're artists.
It's also usually divorced from the development of the game or the making of the game, right?
Divorced from
the design of the game.
Design. It is
design.
The main chunk of the development.
Okay. It's usually divorced from the design of... and sometimes that's not always the case, but in a lot of cases, someone will design a game where they'll have a rule set, and then they'll figure out the theme to apply to it, and then change it to fit that.
I think that's less common, but...
Really?
From what I understand, a lot of times the publisher will change the theme, but typically, almost always the designer's pitching the game and has a prototype with a theme in mind, and they'll do rudimentary stuff to make the game playable, but a publisher isn't expecting art or completed design. They're expecting something they can play and get an understanding if it's good.
Because a lot of that is finishing touches.
Right, that's the development. That's what the publisher is doing is, they'll have in-house artists or artists they hire frequently or things like that who can do all of that stuff, hopefully in concert with the designer. Yeah. Anyways, for all those listening, let me know what you think of game aesthetics or design or whatever you want to call it. If you have any games that you really either dislike or like, or your perception of them changes based on the aesthetics of the game, like the ones we've mentioned, I'd be very curious to see what those games are. Thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to check out thethoughtfulgamer.com. Check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And if you would like to be one of the people chatting with us and listening and watching to our podcast recordings live, go to the patreon.com/thethoughtfulgamer. All support there through Patreon is greatly appreciated. It keeps us running and helps us keep doing cool things. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and wherever you listen to podcasts. We will talk to you all again soon. Goodbye.
Peace out.
Good night.
Sweet.
We did a
Solid
podcast. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done...
Scheduling's been rocky.
Yeah. You and Amber did one after PAX, but other than that, I feel like we've done one since November or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, because Amber and I have done 2 of the last 3 before this.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next...
What are we going to do for abstract games? That's the next one, right? Or
next
is that not gonna
one will be
the
abstract, I think I have scheduled.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no. The next one I'm going to, as long as the schedule doesn't change, the next one I'll actually be interviewing the designer of Tiny Towns. The one after that, right at the end of the month, will be the abstract one.
Okay.
And then after that, hopefully we will be interviewing Elizabeth Hargrove, who designed that bird game we were talking about, Wingspan. But I'll get back in contact with her in a couple weeks. She said she's out of town till February.
Yeah, okay.
Mark, you know what is like birds, but cooler?
Dinosaurs?
Absolutely.
But if you think about them in another way, birds are just living dinosaurs. The dinosaurs still around.
That evolved out of their coolness.
A chicken's basically just like a raptor, but fatter and tastier.
Yeah.
Have you seen a chicken's talons? These things are
Yeah.
vicious.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
We need more dinosaur games.
There were a number of them that came out recently.
Yeah, I don't think I've played
When are
any
you
of
gonna
them.
get that? Oh gosh, not. It's like the evolution game. That's. It's like the whole series of them. What are those called?
Oh, BIOS?
Oh,
BIOS. Yeah. When
yeah,
are you gonna
Matt,
get-
you were supposed to be getting all the Sierra Madre games.
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm never gonna play them outside of playing them at your place, which is fine. Yeah, I forget which one I was gonna get and then didn't. But
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
well.
sure it had dinosaurs in it, whichever one you chose.
yeah, because one of them's like microscopic life, and then another's dinosaurs.
Which one would your sister be more likely to play? I guess
Probably
she's
either.
not really into microscopic life, right? It's not her thing.
I mean, that's what her research is, but she doesn't
Oh, is it? Okay. I thought it was
love.
insects.
She doesn't love the research aspect of grad school.
Okay.
Yeah, her work is with nematodes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm tired, so I'm going to
Oh.
go to bed.
Me too.
Games tomorrow.
Yep, I'll be over.
Sweet.
Cool.
We do the RPG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, for next week, do you guys want to try to do the Three Body Problem podcast?
Yeah.
Like on Monday or something?
Yeah. Monday night
Yeah,
is
we can do
probably good.
Pencil in Monday night?
Let's pencil in Monday night.
Sweet. Cool. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. I
Thanks
guess.
for watching, people. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Internet.